All right, so listen up. We're back in action. And I have, of late, if you've been paying attention, been doing a deep dive into presuppositional apologetics. And I am fashioning out a killer of an argument for which I do not think there is any rejoinders. I actually think it's game-changing in case closed, game over, but we'll see. Bearing that in mind, I will start this video with the little caveats. A little caveat preemptor. Why? If you are a cool atheist, if you're an atheist I generally like, it's really easy to become one of those type of atheists. How do you do it? You're just cool to me. If you're cool to me, I'm cool right back. I like him. No, he's cool to me. That's exactly what I'll say too. I like that guy. Why? He's cool to me. I got no issue with him. I don't care. If you're an atheist in general, I don't care at all what you believe. You are free to believe whatever you want. This argument that I'm presenting is not for the cool atheists. Why? They don't need arguments. If you're a Christian listening to me, our job is not to argue with cool atheists. If someone is a cool, you decide if they're a cool atheist, are they acting cool? Do they want to have discussions about fun, whatever type things? Then do so. Why? Because that's a much better witness. That is actually what you are instructed to do by the Apostle Paul. I kid you not. Paul says to go out there and preach the gospel. Says, I become like everybody so that I might win some. What does that mean? What do you talk about? Whatever's on the table. God wants to talk about Guns N' Roses, you talk about Guns N' Roses. That's not holy, Craig. It's what Paul says to do. God wants to talk about Guns N' Roses, you talk about Guns N' Roses. Why? Paul said it. I become like everybody so that I might win some. The real way to win people over is to plant seeds. That's what the Bible commands you to do. Doesn't say to get in their face and argue with them. It says to plant seeds. Break bread. Establish rapport is step one. What is step two? There is no step two. Establish rapport. This argument, the reason why I'm sending this caveat is because this argument I honestly believe is really powerful and a game changer. And I'm asking you to use it responsibly. I'm sending it out there and I'm going to teach it to other people and they're going to go and they're going to kill in my name. I've got my one little pit bull that I'm training in private. You may have heard of her. Her name is Stephanie. Yeah! Be afraid, atheists in the final analysis. Be very afraid. Why? Because Stephanie is coming and she don't look happy to see you. She doesn't? No, she really doesn't. So, if the instruction of the Bible is actually to be at peace with everyone, as much as it depends on you. So if an atheist is cool and they want to be at peace with you, be at peace with them. There's no need to present an argument to them at all. This argument is solely, there's a different type of atheist out there. It's a big part of the atheist community. It's a dogmatic, ideological, in-your-face goofball. The key is ideological, aggressive, evangelical atheist who is in your face. This is for them. Why? Because you need to go on the offense. You need to get up inside of their face and rattle their cage on purpose. That's why I gave the caveat. This is an argument designed to throw them off. And it will work. Why? Because it's really powerful. Gamed it out ahead of time, it's a game changer. And if you're a cool atheist, I don't ask you to decide anything about it. You can think about it in the privacy of your own home. You're free to believe whatever you want. I have nothing emotionally invested in what you believe at all. I could care less. I, honest to God, could care less. If you don't tell me you're an atheist, I won't even know. I won't even ask. Why? Because I don't care. You're free to believe whatever you want. This is for a certain type of atheist. An evangelical, ideological, in-your-face atheist, kind of like Pine Creek Doug. What does Pine Creek Doug do? He spends morning, noon, and night trying to find Christians, get inside their head, and rattle their cage. This is for them. Why? To go on the offense against him. They've already told you ahead of time. They've already told you ahead of time, 1,000 times if you heard it once. Extraordinary claims, extraordinary proof, right? Have they said that? Am I making that up? Well, that's a very important thing. Why? Because they're telling you this is the weakness of evidentiary apologetics, that the standard of evidentiary justification, the bar is set so high for the evidence that you're going to present that it has to actually shatter their paradigm of reality. That's literally what they said. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Couple big problems with that. First of all, the claim God exists is not extraordinary. It is a mundane claim being believed by most people throughout history. You're the odd man out, not the theist, in general, if you look at world history. Second of all, there is no such thing as extraordinary evidence. None. There is compelling evidence and good evidence, and there's weak and bad evidence, insufficient evidence. There is no such thing, not now, not ever, as extraordinary evidence. So they have made your job well nigh impossible. And they have gone about their task of trying to get inside your head and rattle your cage. Now, I'm going to unpack that a lot in videos to come. See what the atheist stratagems usually are, because they're only certain types. That's why I started going into what I call the sleight of hand school of counter-apologetics. Most atheist arguments are those. Those are deeply misleading gimmicks that they have used to get inside your head and rattle your cage. The reason why I'm preempting what I'm about to teach you is it's not a gimmick. It is predicated on one of the main discussions in philosophy in the last 500 years, a very important one. And I've gamed it out, and I'm almost positive it's 100% legit and correct and really powerful. That's why I'm telling you ahead of time. It is not to be used irresponsibly to jerk some atheist chain and give somebody a hard time for no reason. If the atheist is cool, you don't use arguments. You just have a chat with him. And if he asks you questions about your Christianity, you answer them as honestly as you can. If not, so be it. It's not your responsibility to get inside anybody's head and make them believe something at all. It's your responsibility to plant seeds, be a peaceful, lovable, humble person, just like yours truly, Craig Reed here, just like you, yeah, just like me. Peaceful, lovable, humble, handsome. You got to work on. I can't give that to you. So with that said, this argument I probably will never present. I'm going to hand it off to my little pit bull that I've been training in private, none other than Stephanie. Yeah, I'll kill him, Craig. Good girl, get fired up. I'll tear out their eyeballs and spit in their dead skull. Okay, Stephanie, that's a little bit much. Okay, I appreciate the enthusiasm, Stephanie. Tone it down just a little. But I won't fire up, Craig, I'm gonna kill him. Okay, I appreciate the passion, Stephanie. Sounds like you're really fired up. I'm really fired up. I'm ready to go. Okay, I get it. I honestly get it. But that's a little bit too aggressive. We don't want to scare them that much. Ultimately, we want to scare them, but not quite that much. We don't want them fearing for their life. I'll tear out their innards and feed it to their children. Okay, once again, I like the passion. The passion is great. Tone down the rhetoric, and the intensity's fine. Just, it's a little bit too violent. I'll work on it. Yeah, work on it, Stephanie. Good girl. But good girl. Good with the passion. Okay, so what is Stephanie going to do? How is she going to kill you? And you're never going to see her coming. You're never going to see her coming. Why? You're going to be, left my ass off. Stephanie's doing precepts, and she's going to literally, what you say you were going to do, Stephanie? I'm going to tear out their innards and feed it to their children. She's literally going to tear out your innards and feed it to your children. That's literally what she's going to do. So pay attention. I'll give you the tools ahead of time. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything. I honestly don't. I think this argument is really strong. The first leg of the argument is killer. I don't see how there's any rejoinder to it. I thought about it a lot. I don't see any possible. So what is she going to do? There's two legs of this argument. The first leg is the killer. First leg is the one we're going to focus on in this video. If I don't get to the second one in this video, so be it. I'm still working on the second one. First leg of the argument, Stephanie is going to come up to you, and she's going to say a phrase made famous by Darth Dawkins. She's going to go, how do you justify your atheist worldview? What did you say, Stephanie? How do you justify your atheist worldview? If you can't hear her, she said, how do you justify your atheist worldview? That is what she's going to ask you, a phrase made famous by Darth Dawkins. And here's the problem. You are going to struggle to answer her. You don't know that now, you will. Why? Every atheist I've ever known has grounded their atheism in three possible ways. They're either empiricist, a naturalist, or a materialist. I've never met any other atheist that any other kind. I don't think there are any. So let's take a look at empiricism, the first and most important of the isms. There is, if you are an empiricist, you can break that down, traces back to the grounding of which is the peripatetic axiom, a phrase sometimes credited to Locke, which states, there is nothing in the intellect which does not first appear in the senses. That is the guiding maxim of all empiricism. Again, I'm talking about the philosophy of empiricism. I am not talking about empirical investigations. Everybody is on board with that. That is what we do to gain knowledge of the external world. Okay, so everybody is on board with empirical investigations. I'm talking about the philosophy of empiricism. Key difference, which can be stripped down to a single maxim, foundational maxim. There is nothing in the intellect which does not first appear in the senses, the peripatetic axiom. Now, a lot of times that is credited to Locke. Some people credit it to Thomas Aquinas. I think it actually originally traces back to Aristotle. Doesn't really matter. The key is, it is false. It is telling you that all of our knowledge is derived from sensory exploration out there. It is false. Now, there is a person, Immanuel Kant. Kant, in his Critique of Pure Reason, keep in mind this is considered one of the at least three to five best philosophy books ever written. There are some people who say it is the best book of philosophy ever written. It was profoundly influential. So Kant, in his Critique of Pure Reason, was actually addressing the empiricists, most importantly Hume. He said, quote, "Hume awoke me from my dogmatic slumber." And what he was trying to do is find a synthesis, was find a middle ground between the rationalists, people like Leibniz and Descartes, and the empiricists, Locke, Hume, Berkeley. And he succeeded. He actually wrote a convincing and compelling rejoinder to Humean skepticism, Humean empiricism. The only reason people don't know this as well as they should is because Kant was notoriously hard to understand. As I've said in other videos, Hume is the most influential philosopher in the atheist community by far. Almost every line of skepticism traces back to Hume and Humean empiricism. Okay? The peripatetic axiom, say it one more time so you understand what we're decimating. There is nothing in the intellect which does not first appear in the senses. Okay, it is utterly false. Kant proved this convincingly. What Kant discovered were the transcendental deductions, the transcendental categories. There are 12 transcendental categories, okay? And they are in place. They are conceptual frameworks in place prior to empirical investigation. The one that I'll use as the simplest example is, for example, space and time. Now you can do empirical investigations on the object in front of you as much as you want. You can break down its physical properties. You can study a million different ways empirically from here till tomorrow. You are never going to learn anything at all from it about what? Space and time. Why is that? Because it is not in the object. It is part of your conceptual framework prior to investigation. Does everybody understand that? That's pretty straightforward, pretty clear, pretty easy to understand, right? Now, Kant discovered that. So pure knowledge is not predicated entirely on sensory observation, which is what the empiricists said. That's the peripatetic axiom. But is predicated on sensory investigation plus the 12 transcendent categories which are in place, conceptual framework, interlocking, complete conceptual framework prior to empirical investigation. Now that's very important. Why? Because that's a complete slam dunk, case closed. Like I said, that is one of the main driving arguments of the Critique of Pure Reason, and the Critique of Pure Reason is one of the 3 or 4 most influential philosophy books of all time. Why? Because Kant was looking for that synthesis between the rationalists and the empiricists and found it. The reason why everybody doesn't know this as a matter of fact, like it's not something they teach, is because he was so notoriously hard to understand. He has this whole complex schema that you probably heard about, the synthetic a priori, a posteriori, which will drive you mad trying to piece together and figure out, and it's kind of beside the point. The real intellectual achievement of the Critique of Pure Reason is his answer to Hume. Humean skepticism was extraordinarily powerful, and Kant was to some degree swimming upstream at the time. Why? Because the empiricists had gained a lot of ground because they had hitched their star to empirical investigations. And the trends at the time, the smart set, were all starting to lean towards what we have today, the skeptics, materialists and naturalists. Why? Because there seemed to be a close symmetry between what Hume was arguing as an empiricist and the value of empirical investigation and what's his face, the physicist, not the physicist, the laws guy, the Newtonian physics. Yeah, physicists and Newton. Newton was profoundly influential, and he was shaking up the entire world with his discoveries. And it seemed to the smart set that empiricism and Newtonian physics went hand in hand. A lot of people made this mistake. A lot. So Kant was to some degree swimming upstream, but it was a profound intellectual achievement. Maybe part of the reason he made it so notoriously hard to understand is kind of an intuition in himself. If he makes it notoriously hard to understand, then nobody really gets at what he's arguing, because it was a radical departure from what was becoming the mainstream of intellectual life. Mainstream intellectual life was dominated by this Enlightenment thinking, this empiricism, And there was a whole shift in reality that started with Hume. That's why Hume is so influential. Part of the reason he's such a good writer. It's part of the reason why everyone has their pocket Hume today. Because he's really lucid, really easy to understand, whereas nobody reads Kant for fun. So Kant was swimming upstream to some degree. The entire history of intellectual thought was starting to turn towards skepticism, empiricism, materialism, those isms. Why? The results were in. And it looked like science, the results were in, and science was producing these results that was blowing everybody's mind. So the smart set was trending towards what we have today. And Kant was swimming upstream at the time, but still had a profound intellectual achievement. And that's the genesis of intellectual achievement. That knowledge is not predicated on sensory observation alone. We bring to the table order imposed prior to empirical investigation. That order is the transcendent categories. Now, as I've said, the two defects of Kant: notoriously hard to understand. Had he been easy to understand, he might have stopped the empiricist skeptical trend right dead in its track. Why? Because it's a really, really fitting rejoinder. It basically answers everything. Hume awoke him from his dogmatic slumber, and then he sort of ended the whole line of thought that Hume was involved in. So he was notoriously hard to understand, otherwise that would have been clear. And the other defect of Kant is that he thought that these were conceptual frameworks inside of the human brain. The second leg of the argument is on less firmer ground. The second leg of the argument, I'll give you the leg of the argument, but I haven't really quite worked it out yet. But it's still a really good argument, so don't get cocky. If you're an atheist, don't get cocky. Why? Because Stephanie's coming on both ends. Promise. She's coming on both ends, and it's a killer argument. The first leg of the argument is killer. I don't see any way out. But we're still got ways to go to unpack that way. The second leg of the argument is if these transcendental categories are, as I say they are, they're interlocking, they are complete, they are an interlocking conceptual framework prior to empirical investigation. How do we know they're there? By the way, transcendental deductions. They are the preconditions of intelligibility. X is a necessary precondition of Y, therefore X. Remember I said in other videos, the transcendental deduction is a powerful tool of inference being dramatically underused by the Christian community. Why dramatically underused? It's a way for evidencing and proving the thing not available for empirical investigation. Oh, yeah, that's really important. That's why evidentiary apologetics has a limit. Why? Because the thing we are trying to evidence for is not available for empirical investigation. It stands outside of the purview of the empirical realm, outside of the natural. In the case of the supernatural, outside of. The transcendental deduction is a powerful tool of inference that gets at the thing not available for empirical investigation. And it states, X is a necessary precondition of Y, therefore X. The example I've used in other videos, a cake is on the table, the cake has been made. Flour and eggs are a necessary precondition of cake. You see cake, therefore there are flour and eggs. I think flour and eggs are a necessary precondition of cake. I've never baked a cake. Or let's just say it's been a long time since I baked a cake, right? Stephanie, I bake them all the time, cake. Come over to my house, I got tons. Okay, Stephanie's baking cakes all the time. Been a long time since I baked my cakes. Can't honestly remember if I ever have. And I think that those are the only two types of things that allow the yeast to rise. I could be wrong about that, but they might not technically be a necessary precondition. But if they are, X is a necessary precondition of Y, therefore X. You get the point. So the transcendental deductions, the transcendental categories, firmly in place prior to empirical investigation as a necessary precondition of intelligibility, and there are 12 of them. And there are conceptual frameworks interlocking prior to investigation. He thought they were in the human mind. You locate them extant to the human mind, and then you have only one possible philosophical evidentiary justification to explain those. Does anybody take a wild guess at what they could be? Take a wild guess. Wild guess. It's not your Sky Fairy, Craig. It is my Sky Fairy, divine conceptualism. But, like I said, the second leg of the argument, don't even worry about that. Why? We're not there yet. Right now, Stephanie is decimating you on the first leg of the argument. Again, she asks you, how do you justify your atheist worldview? And what, Stephanie? I got him by the cojones, Craig. She's got you by the cojones. Why? Because you were either an empiricist, a naturalist, or a materialist. I just told you how Kant answered the empiricist. Empiricism is false as a philosophical grounding. False. It hinges on the peripatetic axiom, which is false, which states there is nothing in the intellect which does not first appear in the senses. Okay, false. Space and time does not appear in the senses first. It is the conceptual framework prior to empirical investigation. Game over. Well, I'm not an empiricist, Craig. That sounds all well and good. I'm a materialist. Even worse for you. I still got you by the cojones. Stephanie still has you by the cojones in a way that's even more consequential and destructive. Squeeze! All right, relax, Stephanie. I'm fed up, Greg. Okay, I get that, but I get it, but it's a little bit insane, Stephanie. I gotta tell you, it's just a little crazy. I'm really fed up though. Damn. So she really has you by the cojones. The first thing that clued me into the fact that materialism was going to struggle, that it was insufficient to explain the world as it actually occurs, was the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness states there's phenomenal consciousness and physical properties, and phenomenal consciousness seems in principle irreducible to strictly physical properties. Everybody understand that? Oh, easy, Craig. This is what a lot of atheists are going to say. Goofy. Haven't studied the problem, but they're going to say, emergent property of the brain, easy. Okay, that doesn't solve anything. I didn't ask you how phenomenal consciousness was formed. Let's just say you're right, and I doubt it, but let's just say you are, and it's an emergent property of the brain. That only tells us how it's formed. It doesn't tell us anything about how it occurs at all. So it is not an answer. There's a profound explanatory gap between phenomenal consciousness and physical properties, and you haven't answered it all with that one word. The other arguments that they usually word are all dismal. Why? Mostly these arguments come from the scientific set. The main trend in philosophy over the last 150 years, the most important trend in philosophy is scientists stopped doing it. Our university system branched off into specialization, and scientists, for the most part, almost routinely to a man, became scientismists. And they said, what do we care what some guy in a toga said 2,000 years ago? We're scientists. We're too smart for that. We're the smart set. So they threw out philosophy. Had they not thrown out philosophy, a lot of these questions that they've been wrestling with would have been a lot more obvious. Why? Because there are answers in Immanuel Kant. There are answers in Immanuel Kant. And I'll get to Carlo Rovelli in a second, who's becoming a philosopher and starting to find answers there too. So, where was I? Materialism. Okay, so you got your gimmicky pseudo-arguments against materialism. All the physicalist arguments for materialism are absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. They're usually not arguments. That's the main one I usually hear from the atheists. Emergent property of the brain, which is irrelevant, doesn't answer anything. Go study the topic deeper. Why? Because it doesn't solve. It makes no difference if you say that. I'm not asking you how it was formed. That's not the part that we're struggling to understand. The other argument I've heard, this one from Patricia Churchland, one of the more well-known, more celebrated of the physicalists, said, one day, literally word for word, one day we will discover an enzyme. She sounds a lot like Stephanie, Craig. No, there's a little difference there. It's a little different. It sounds a little bit like, sounds a lot like me, Craig. No, really doesn't. Pay closer attention. One day we will discover an enzyme. It's different. She sounds different. It's a good imitation. Shut up. We will discover an enzyme or a protein, and it will show us that it was brain all along. Did you hear what she said? That's literally almost word for word, and it was a good imitation. She said, one day we will discover an enzyme or a protein that will show us it was brain all along. It was always brain. Okay, that's literally her argument. That's a terrible argument. And it was a great imitation. It was a great imitation of her, but a terrible argument. That is literally naturalism by faith. It's not an argument at all. The new argument that they're trying to pawn off as an argument is, oh, it's a pseudo problem. There's not really a hard problem of consciousness. Oh, good, you solved it then. You don't just get to label something a pseudo problem without explaining why. There's a profound explanatory gap. If you don't get it, that means you haven't really studied the topic. It doesn't mean you're the smartest person that ever lived and you just figured it out on the fly because you're so super intelligent. Get a hold of yourself. Why? Because if that's your argument, there's a really good chance that you're a pseudo-philosopher because that's a pseudo-argument. You aren't the smartest person in town. Bring yourself down to earth immediately. Why? Because you're embarrassing yourself. Trust me. That's an embarrassing, not really argument. Oh, I'm smarter than David Chalmers. David Chalmers didn't know there was a pseudo-argument. It's a pseudo-problem. You got it all figured out. Get over yourself. You're headed for a fall. Trust me on that. You are headed for a fall. Anyways, so if by some miracle you solve the hard problem of consciousness, I really don't care. I really don't mind. Really don't mind if we sit this one out. What is that? This is, what is that? Jethro Tull? So the wise men all know how it feels to be thick as a brick. Something like that. I don't know, it just occurred to me. Don't know why I sang it, don't know why I did that. Moving right along. So, if for some miracle of miracles you figure out the hard problem of consciousness and you answer, it doesn't matter. Why? Because I got you. I still got you with the even challenging, ever more challenging, even more vexing, insoluble for the materialist measurement problem physics. Oh, yeah, real O. Or, I still got it by the cojones, Craig. I'm loving it. I got it by the cojones. Yes, Stephanie still has it by the cojones. Why? Because if from a miracle you find a good explanation for the hard problem of consciousness, you won't, but if you would, okay, I still got you by the hard problem of literally everything else. Huh? Yep, the hard problem of literally everything else. See, the main thing that happened with the scientific community is they stopped doing philosophy about 150 years ago. That's why they're lousy at philosophy. That's why they come up with pseudo-arguments and think they're great. That's why they come up with pseudo-justifications and think they work. Why? Because they stopped doing philosophy and they're terrible at it. Had they been doing philosophy, they would have known their Kant, and this is something almost all of you know, the noumena-phenomena distinction. My wording of it is a lot easier to understand. There is matter, and there is phenomena and matter, and there is a slight discrepancy between the two. That slight discrepancy annihilates materialism as a candidate option. Why? Because the material facts of something are never going to get you to the phenomena. Period. Did I stutter? No. Stephanie won. No, I didn't stutter at all. Stephanie won. Think it through. I said it too fast. I said it too fast, Craig. I fried my brain. I told you. This apologetic is literally designed to fry the brain of an evangelical atheist who thinks he's the smartest guy in town. This is literally designed to make him go, ah. Why? Because it's powerful and it's true and it's real. The entire building block of your atheist worldview is predicated on three possibilities: empiricism, naturalism, materialism, all three of which are insufficient to explain the data. They will be done as worldviews within a 20 to 30 years. Why? For the reasons I'm telling you right here, right now. They've known this from the days of Kant. Kant called it the noumena-phenomena distinction. It's pretty well-known Kantianism. You probably heard of it. What does it mean? There's the thing in itself, the object over there, the material facts of the matter. And then there's the phenomena of the thing itself. That's why I said there's matter, and then there's phenomena of matter. And there's a slight discrepancy between the two. The slight discrepancy ends materialism as a candidate philosophical option. Why? Because materialism, a philosophical worldview has three main things. It has to be coherent. It has to offer explanatory power, which was materialism's initial calling card. You can learn a lot about a subject if you break it down to its physical processes. And it has to be logically coherent. Okay, the explanatory power fails in materialism at the quantum level. And it also fails to divulge what? The phenomena of the matter. There's matter, and then there's a phenomena of matter. This is what Mary's room was trying to evidence. There are some people who will say to right now, oh, Mary's room, the guy disavowed it. Doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter at all. If you're one of those people who think that's important, it's not. Why? Because the argument he presented stands or falls based on the quality of its own argumentation. It has nothing to do with whether he disavowed it or not. That's completely irrelevant. What probably happened is smart set neuroscientist type guys, physicalists, got inside his head and rattled his cage, made him lose confidence in the quality of his own argumentation. But the argument stands or falls based on its own internal logic, not on whether he still believes it or not. And the argument underscores the obvious, which I can evidence. Stephanie can evidence you 1,000 different ways. 1,000 different ways. Why? Because there is matter and phenomena of matter. And the actual material facts of something never give you the phenomena. They're insufficient to explain, so they lack explanatory power. They have explanatory power up to a point, but they're never going to give you the phenomena. That's what Mary's room is trying to make plain to you. So I can make plain to you 1,000 different ways. Think of a concert. You can understand the material facts of a piece of music as much as you want. It's never going to give you the phenomena. How do you get the phenomena? You put the headphones on your head, listen to the music. The phenomena is not found in the material substance of a thing. There is the object in and of itself, the material facts, which gives you a lot of information, but it's never going to give you the phenomena. So even if you think you found the answer to the hard problem of consciousness, you're going to have to wrestle with and never answer the hard problem of everything else. Why? Because the material facts, what something is material comprised of, is never going to give you the phenomena. Materialism fails on those grounds, and it fails forever. No saving it. Why? Because I'm telling you the God's honest truth. The other thing is the measurement problem in physics. Now, unlike other physicists, Carlo Rovelli decided to become a philosopher. And actually, recently, he's become a very good one. And unlike the peripatetic axiom, he came up with an axiom that's actually really sound, really good. And it goes like this. There is no such thing as a particle independent of its interactions. Think about what he just said. That's him, that's not me. I'm just giving it a little clearer emphasis. That's his axiom. There is no such thing as a particle independent of its interactions. That right there is the answer to the measurement problem in physics. Think about it. You can think of an individual particle in your imagination. Does one ever exist in the real world? No. Why? Because as soon as you introduce a particle in the real world, it interacts with other particles. There's no such thing in reality as a single particle. Think of H2O. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. As soon as you introduce a particle, it interacts with its environment. Now think of the measurement problem in physics. What does it say? It says, prior to measurement, the particle exists in a wave of probability. Why is this so trippy? It's so trippy and mysterious, Craig. I understand. It's really trippy and mysterious. It's freaking me out. Why is it so trippy and mysterious? Because it seems as if a probability has not occurred yet. So it seems as if we are literally saying the particle is not there until measured, right? Now, introduce Carlo Rovelli's axiom. There's no such thing as a particle independent of its interactions. So why do we not know where the particle is? Because we haven't measured it yet. Oh, yeah, it's not all that trippy and mysterious and weird. Why does stall out physics for 150 years? Because they stopped doing philosophy. Carlo Rovelli started doing philosophy, and he started to come up with some really good internal unpackings, interpretive frameworks for what's going on in quantum mechanics. But he had to first do what? Train his brain to think differently than all the materialist, physicalist paradigms. Why? Because they hardwire something into your brain. That's why a really smart person like Sean Carroll says I'm a physicalist and then undercuts the whole reality of that philosophical framing with his next sentence, because I believe the physical world exists and we can know its properties. He introduced a conscious agent. That's the part of quantum mechanics that you can never get rid of. Subject and object are coupled at the quantum realm. At the macro level, they aren't. So at the macro level, materialism can still be true as an interpretive framework. Why? Because I have a table in front of me, okay? I can disassemble its steel table. I can disassemble its properties, break it down to its smallest particles, find out it melts at 100 degrees. From that, you have the scientific revolution. I can build ships, planes. We are now in the quantum era. The mathematics are more precise and the measurements are much smaller and more refined. At the quantum level, there is no such thing as a particle independent of its interaction. There's no such thing as a steel desk that I can interact with without affecting. Subject and object are to some degree coupled. It's up to the physicist to find out what degree, but to some degree they're coupled, thus ending materialism forever and always as a candidate option. Why? Because materialism says the opposite, that there's an objective, real material world out there independent of me. There isn't. At the macro level, there is. I go to bed at night. I can't do anything to my table at bed at night. But when I start taking measurements at the quantum level, I affect those measurements. They are subject and object are coupled to some degree. And that some degree is everything. Why? Because it has insufficient explanatory value. Philosophy has to be able to, an interpretive framework that has to be able to account for and explain everything. And materialism fails on those grounds. It fails on two key grounds that are worse than the hard problem of consciousness as far as I'm concerned. Insoluble. The measurement problem in physics. Why? Because the particle is dependent on the observer to some degree. Where the particle is dependent on where the measurer. To some degree. Not entirely, but to some degree. Subject and object are coupled is the way I've been saying it. That's the best way to think of it. And the other one, the hard problem of everything else, there is matter and phenomena of matter. You can unpack the material substrate of something as much as you want. It's never going to teach you anything about the phenomena. In order to understand what a concert sounds like, you have to do what? Put the headphones on your head and listen to it. That's what Mary's Room is trying to show you. In order to understand what visual looks like, you have to what? See it. Ooh, you have to see it. Because everyone wrestles over, are you learning something? Well, it's stupid. Obviously, you have to see something in order to what? Know what it looks like. You're never going to know what something looks like until what? Till you open your eyes and look. Someone can whisper in your ears all the physical ramifications, and you could be the most smartest person that ever walked the face of the earth. You are never going to know what something looks like until you what? Open your eyes and look. And that is not derived from the physical properties. It's barely loosely related to the physical properties. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Again, matter, phenomena of matter. Materialism fails on those grounds. Why? Because you can never derive enough information from matter itself to tell you anything about the phenomena of matter. End of materialism. Stephanie wins. Stephanie wins, game over, case closed, shut down. Again, Stephanie is going to ask you, how do you justify your atheist worldview? What are you going to answer now? I can't. I can't. There's the matter and motion, all there is crew. Empiricist, naturalist, materialist, we're all in that camp. Nowadays, you have people trying to break out, but they're trying to break out in ways that were invalid according to the original paradigms. So you have Emerson Green, who says he's a spooky naturalist. He's smart. He gets it. Why? Because they are insufficient. Matter and motion is all there is, except that it isn't. If you reduce matter and motion down to its fundamental building blocks, you have nothing. Logical positivism, which is self-refuting and incoherent. If you reduce actual matter down to its fundamental building blocks, what do you actually have? Transcendent other than matter and motion. The transcendent other is the key. What? Because the transcendent other is there in the transcendent categories as proof by the transcendent deductions. Your sense-making apparati are located in the transcendent realm, forever and always, non-negotiable, inarguable. They are the preconditions of intelligibility in all cases. Kant proved this conclusively. The only reason you don't know he did that was because you wrestle with his book. Smart people wrestle with his book and don't fully understand what he's saying. You really want to know your Kant, there's Dan Robinson. There's a great philosopher lecture, Dan Robinson, 6 or 7 videos on Kant. Then you'll really start to get it. It is really good at explaining. You're like, oh, now I finally get it. A lot of the Kant is irrelevant. Synthesis a priori, all that crap, irrelevant. Or no, the synthetic a prioris, and it's a schema, it's interesting, but it's not relevant. The real achievement is he found the middle ground between the rationalists and the empiricists. Prior to empirical investigation, you carry into you a 12 transcendent categories, the precondition of intelligibility. They are absolute precondition. They are the necessary precondition of knowledge, period. Now, the second leg of the argument, if that's only internal, that's part of your conceptual framework prior to investigation. This is inarguable, guys. I promise. It might not sound like it's game over. It's game over. Stephanie's going to annihilate with you. Please don't go near her. I'm going to kill you. What are you going to do, Steph? I'm going to tear out your innards and feed it to your children. She's literally going to tear out your innards and feed it to your children. That's hardcore. You don't want to play with Stephanie. You don't want to mess with Stephanie. You want to just be cool with Craig, and we don't have to talk about atheists. You can be an atheist in the privacy of your own home as much as you want. If you're evangelical atheist, you should stop. Why? Because you're wrong. Because you're wrong. Because the reason why all your arguments suck is because, and I've unpacked this. I'll go into that. There's a really good reason why all your arguments suck. Why? Because you're mistaken. The Transcendental Categories is the greatest philosophy book of all time. And why is it such a monumental achievement in philosophy? Because it answered Hume. There are some people who say Plato's Republic. Okay, that's probably what most people say is the greatest philosophy book. This is the second or third. It's in the short list of the best philosophy books of all time. Why? Because it convincingly answered Hume. Hume awoke him from his dogmatic slumber and he put to bed all of empiricism. The only reason we don't know it yet is because he was so hard to understand. What I just told you is the God's honest truth. If I were misrepresenting Kant, you'd have a leg to stand on. I'm not. I promise. I promise. The 12 transcendent categories. They're interlocking. Your sense-making apparatus are located in the transcendent realm. Think of it again this way. Matter and motion is all there is. That's what the materialist originally said. That's what the naturalist originally said, except that it isn't. You reduce matter and motion down to its fundamental building blocks, you have literally nothing. Logical positivism, which is incoherent and self-refuting. When you actually reduce matter and motion down to its fundamental building blocks, you have what? Transcendent other than matter and motion, where all of your interlocking sensory apparatus, where sense-making apparatus are located. If that is inside the human mind conceptual framework as Kant thought, then it's just an interlocking, it is the preconditions of intelligibility inside the human mind. If it's outside the human mind, think about it. What else could possibly explain that other than divine conceptualism? There's no other possible explanatory framework, none. So the second leg of the argument is pretty good too. Pretty good. I think game over, but I haven't fully impacted, so I won't say game over. The first leg is game over. Stephanie will literally take out, what are you going to do again? She's literally going to take out their innards. God, you really have struggle with this. Okay, fine. I didn't really hear it that well. She's like my wife now. She's going to take out their innards, and I'm going to feed it to their children. Okay, that's a little bit sick, Stephanie. It's twisted, I know, but it's effective, Craig. Sounds twisted, I know, Craig, but it's really effective. You do it once, you never have to do it again. Okay, so Stephanie's gonna, if you dare to debate Stephanie, she's literally going to take out your inside and feed it to your children. As she said, there's a reason I'm so hardcore. There's a reason she wants to be so hardcore. Because if she makes an example of one of you, she never has to do it again. So one of you, I dare you to debate Stephanie on this. It's game over, guys. Honestly, it is. I don't know if I said it clear enough in this video for you to walk away from the table going, wow, wait a minute, he's right. I'm right. Promise. I promise. I promise. I promise. I promise. Think it through. Think it through. Okay? Everybody says Kant's book is like the most influential philosophy book, one of the greatest, most influential. Why? Because he answered Hume. Why was Hume so powerful and influential? Because one, he's a good writer, he's really lucid, easy to read, enjoyable. That helped a lot. Two, empiricism was shaking the world because of Newtonian physics. It was rewiring everybody's paradigm of reality prior to Newtonian physics was theistic leaning. Then people started to go, well, wait a minute. Materialism is so powerful. It offered so much, seeming to offer so much explanatory power. Why? Because science produces results. It's still why atheists think it's the only game in town. Why? Because it actually gives you achievable, knowable, measurable results. Right? That's why Kant was swimming upstream. He had to come up with philosophy that was actually rigorous enough for science. And it is. And he did. He got it. He nailed it. The preconditions of intelligibility, okay? If without your categorization, without you imposing some order on your sensory inputs, everything would be a cascading chaos. Look at your room right now. You are not seeing matters, molecules flying around and zooming chaotic, this and that, right? That's actually what's there. That's actually what's there. Do you understand it now? That's literally actually what's there. Stuff flying around, zooming, colliding. It's a chaos. What do you see? You see a couch, you see a lamp, you see a pretty little white cat, if you happen to be fortunate enough to have one. You are imposing order. Kant is correct. There is an imposition of order on this seeming chaos, the transcendental categories. They are known by what? Transcendental deduction. X is necessary. Precondition of Y, therefore X. Now, if he was right about the other part, that it's internal to a human being, then it's not a good argument for God. He isn't. They're extant to a human being. Which means I'll slow down on that one. I don't need your tithes just yet. The first leg of the argument is the one that's the real killer. Why? Because every atheist hinges on empiricist, naturalist, materialist. If there's any atheist out there that's got any other fundamental worldview that's different, I've never met them, and I doubt there is. Those are usually the three. And all three of them fail. Why? Because they do not account for the world as it actually occurs. Transcendent categories. Things transcendent to matter and motion. They have to fit in with the explanatory framework of either naturalism, empiricism, materialism. And naturalism is trying to update and move to account for transcendent categories. Okay? But once it does, it is something other than what naturalism originally was. So, there you have it, kids. I think it was pretty good. You know, it's pretty good. Stephanie, I think we're gonna nail him, Craig. You know, it wasn't quite your best work, but I think you really nailed him. Wasn't quite your best work, though. What's the matter with it? I don't know. Weak sauce. That wasn't weak sauce. Shut up, Stephanie. Shut up. So Stephanie thinks Stephanie's going to come kill you. So there you have it, kids. That is all for now. Honestly, it's game over. I'll go over it again in a couple of videos to come, and then I'll move on to other even just as fertile territory. So with that, the Mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.